Hey guys and girls, Bored now, back with you. On this video I will be talking about the third episode of the fourth season of The Handmaid's Tale. It is called The Crossing, aka Let's Torture June for an hour and revert to type for just that hour before moving on to something else. That's my subheading for this title, for this episode. An incredibly frustrating episode, but one where by the end of it, hopefully, we're moving towards something a little more interesting and positive. It's it's one of those funny episodes, basically. So the big cliffhanger at the end of last week's was that June, when returning to the farm, was captured again, and they were waiting for them being the Guardians. Nick was there also, and he, as a way of trying to help June, trying to help her survive, he sort of asked her, where are the other handmaids? But the crucial moment is that June didn't give up their whereabouts. She stood firm. All we knew is that they had left the farm and that June wasn't going to give them up. So that's the cliffhanger really moving into this episode. Before I go any further review, I just want to remind you guys to please like this video if you like it, basically. Also, if you're interested in more and helping out the channel, then please share it on your social media feeds. That always helps get more eyeballs, more interest on my channels and the videos. And also, if you could comment on the video, a reaction to my thoughts and stuff, or any feelings you have on this episode, that helps as always. So yeah, it's very easy to subscribe. Just hit the link or hit the tab in the bottom corner. So thanks for that. And yeah, it's one of these episodes where very little else happens apart from the stuff with June and about her torture and her resistance in not wanting to give the handmaids up. There's almost like a dogged determination, and it really plays into Elizabeth Moss's strengths as an actress, because she is so good at playing this very, war torn but very determined and steely sort of figure. Also, she directs this episode. I noticed at the end. I think she might have directed the odd episode in the past, so I guess no surprise. I think that's quite common nowadays for like someone who's been attached to a show as long as she has with this one, and obviously she's an executive producer and has a great deal of creative power, I would think, on this show. So she also directs the episode and does a pretty solid job, I have to say. Now, it goes through quite a lot of the familiar Handmaid's Tale beats, and I guess I can't knock the episode too much because it does most of what it does pretty well. That there's quite a nice directorial moment, actually, a scene early on, because we see Aunt Lydia return. We sort of find out really that she has been the driving force between getting June and the handmaids back, and Aunt Lydia has almost taken the whole rebellion from June very personal and kind of taken offence to it and blames her, and I guess is just determined not to lose power, so has been behind the charge to reclaim her. And there's a nice bit of direction where June is being led through the halls when she's first captured, and she's taken to her cell where there's like an infrared type style going on in the corridor, and we also get a shot at the other cells and the people staying there, and it was a nice bit of direction, but it just takes the episode to a very predictable place. We see a bit of like mind games between June and Aunt Lydia. We see June really defiant to Aunt Lydia, just probably telling the truth, to be fair. You can't really argue with anything she says. She says, hey, you failed these girls. You promised that they would be safe, and if they followed the rules, they would be okay and you failed them. And she also rubs it in her face about her daughter. So digging a little into some of what we saw last season, and it's all good stuff from a dramatic point of view, and Elizabeth Moss is very convincing in the scene. But it's just the frustration of going through familiar beats now that we're in the fourth season, and we kind of want the main focus to be on the rebellion, and the main focus to be on what's happening in Canada and the ripple effect. But I guess where it feels quite suitable is the fact that the big theme of this season so far is June's legacy as a handmaid and in Gilead, and what it sort of means. So it's almost quite a meta sort of theme, where because she's such a big focus in this episode, and there's almost like this question mark put out there at one point by Lawrence, because, sorry, not Lawrence, Francis, we see him talking to Nick, where Nick is obviously very concerned about June, and Francis says, well, she's done her bit, but what if this is it for her? What if she served her purpose and it's just time to move on? And you can't help but feel that maybe they're being a bit meta there in a bit of a cheeky way. It's almost like the audience questioning that side of the show is, have they taken June as far as she can go as a character in this sort of direction? And obviously, Francis is one of the more likable, like, male characters in this world. And it's quite a nice scene between him and Nick. Now, Nick plays quite a big part in this episode, and I have to sort of say, I do wonder if maybe he has served his purpose in the show, that maybe they've gotten all they can get out of the June Nick sort of love thing. But I guess one of the things this episode is saying is that ultimately June's future might be in Gilead, where this might be her fate, and there may be no way around that. And maybe that's her legacy, just the fact that she has sacrificed herself and she's done it for the greater good. She's done it to free many children and many handmaids, and that she just might have to accept then she is fated to this place one way or the other. So again, that almost feels quite meta in itself, but there's little bits in Canada where Luke is sort of, he's gotten wind about June being arrested, and he's concerned about, well, why did she make the decision to stay in Gilead? She probably knew at one point she would get caught, and she sort of he questions June in that moment, and whether she almost wanted to stay in Gilead, whether she saw her future more there. And I think that's also why we have one particular beat in the episode, which is like June and Nick sort of rekindling their romance, albeit very briefly, because there's a scene with them late on in the episode when June essentially is being reposted to like a Connolly, and it's maybe the last time she'll see Nick, so they do have a big romantic moment. It kind of feels like something out of like a romantic movie. The camera sort of swells, it's all very dramatic. I guess it works well enough in the moment just because of the point it's making, but it's probably one of those scenes that they could have toned down a little bit. Yeah, I think this episode does bring that into sharp focus. Then, is this just June's destiny to be in Gilead for the foreseeable future? We go through a lot of the familiar torture beats and the sort of the misery porn, as it's often been termed in this show, and because of that, not that it's a bad episode, but it just sort of feels like an episode where it's like, yeah, been here, done that, And let's move on to the next thing. This, in some ways, feels like a wasted episode. Mostly because by the end, no surprise, they do end up escaping. There's a back and forth anyway, where June at one point gives them the wrong location, and the stakes are sort of raised where a couple of handmaids are shoved off the roof in front of her, and that she has to watch that. And they pull out the big guns like Francis is used, and he kind of advises her then you need to work with them for your own sake and for Hannah's sake. And that's kind of the last straw, where he says they don't care about children here. They will go after your daughter if you don't comply. And that is the last straw for June. That is when she finally does comply, and we have an emotional scene where we actually see Hannah for the first time in a long time. She's being held in a cage and put on display really for June, and the message is sent that about we will do damage to Hannah if you don't give up the handmaids. And again, it's this really torturous sort of process, and it gets the job done, but it just feels a bit too familiar, a bit like drawing this stuff out again. And there's certain things that the episode is doing which is interesting. This idea of end of an era, as far as this group of handmaids is concerned, because ultimately what happens is, like, as a sentence for the rebellion, Aunt Lydia decides to post them out to, as I said earlier, to like a colony, to where she says that'll be it. You'll live out the rest of your days there, handmaids. But what ultimately happens, and as soon as the Radiohead music comes in, as soon as Street Spirit started up and they're in the back of this van, Lydia's there as well. That I love the use of music, but it just telegraphed that, hey, something's going to happen. And I think it was just a bit overly telegraphed, because you got the sense that they weren't really going to return to this status quo, having done it for so long, that this wasn't that season. This is the season of rebellion. This is the season of June trying to get her child back, and all the rest of it, really. It's more about June's legacy as a handmaid and the rebellion than anything else. So I think it's why it feels mostly like a wasted and frustrating episode. The ending itself was quite well done. I sort of liked the touch of the driver excusing himself at one point and going to the bathroom, because definitely think that was like planned, that the driver wanted to help the handmaid, so that's why he came up with the excuse to leave, and just give them an opportunity alone with Lydia to like overpower her. And I think that was June. It's June who does it. She sees like the cane sort of loose, and she takes that chance to overpower her, and they escape. And June is so close to battering Lydia to death, basically. And it's one of the other handmaids that talks her out of it, says, "No, we've got to escape." And you get this dramatic final scene when they're fleeing across a train track. The guards are called by Lydia, like they shoot, and a bunch of them die. A couple of them, at least. June and Janine, yeah, that's the other handmaid. June and Janine make it across. There's at least two who are hit by the train, maybe one. It was either one or two, but they were making a dash for it, and that's kind of it. That's the dramatic end, and that's why we see at the end like a sort of retrospective, just a flashback to their first night together in Gilead in the same place. So Moira's there as well, because it's obviously back when she was a handmaid and they were staying in the same place. So ending anyway, Janine and June escape to fight another day, but a bunch of the handmaids are either killed or captured again, so it does feel like the end for them, or the end of like that particular chapter, and that they'll never see each other again one way or the other. So that's The Handmaid's Tale for this week. Crossing. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and share me out on social media. As I said, it helps get more attention on the channel. Let me know in the comments also what you thought of this episode, what you're thinking of season 4 as a whole. But I'll be back with more TV reviews soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.